In this new episode of Wisdom Personified, Conversations with Dudu Msomi, I am speaking to Sangeeta Leach, someone I proudly claim as a friend. There is a quote by Maya Angelou that says, "A friend may be behind a stranger's face." I first met Sangs, as I call her, in 1996 when she moved to South Africa from India via Nairobi, Kenya, where she worked and lived for a couple of years. We were colleagues at Saatchi and Saatchi Advertising and soon became firm friends. More than 2 decades later, not even the distance of her moving to Sydney, Australia could break the bond. From the instant you meet Sangs, there is no doubt that her intelligence is palpable. Even as a young person, she was also undoubtedly wise, as evident in her good judgement, behaviour, problem-solving abilities, and understanding of the human condition. I am so looking forward to drawing more wisdom from my friend Sangs. Thank you so much for making the time. I shall not say again, but just thank you for making the time. So we met in our early 20s when you came to work and live in South Africa. Can you tell me a bit about your upbringing? Where were you born? Do you have siblings? What were your joyful moments as a child?
So I was born in a small town called Wellington in India, in the south. I'm the youngest of 6, hence my slight, some say bratishness and others say determination. I had to really work to stand out, I think. But my father was an engineer in the military, in the Indian military. And so we traveled a lot. We moved every 18 months to 2 years. And he happened to be posted in Wellington when I was born. And I have to say, I think probably the most wonderful part of my childhood was that constant nomadic existence. Moving to a new place every 18 months, making new friends, going to a new school, being in a completely different environment, from the foothills of the Himalayas right down to big cities, So we really had a very eventful childhood, I would say. Elephants in the backyard, and just moving with my large family. This was always quite easy, actually, because we had a ready-made setup and a network wherever we went. We saw some beautiful parts of India.
Yeah, and that life, nomadic life, even though you have a root in Sydney, it still continues with your travel. So in the African tradition, naming a child is a meaningful event that bestows the desires of the parents and the family upon the child with the given name, which is why I love my name Dudu. But anyway, is it the same in the Hindu tradition? You are named Sangeeta, which means music or musical. What meaning does your name have in your life and how you move through the world?
Yeah, it's a very sad one, actually. My parents hoped that I would be very musical, and honestly, I have a musical bone in my body. But I think if I think about it metaphorically, I do find that sort of joy and harmony and sort of melding of tones and cultures is how I choose to see mine, because seriously, it skipped a generation.
So you're the co-owner of the Leach Partnership based in Sydney, Australia. What is the core business of Leach Partnership?
Fundamentally, it's about building value into creative organizations. You know that our background has always been rooted in creativity. And we came to the realization that creative organizations need some amount of structure, but not so much that it strangles them. They need some amount of business thinking and rigor, but again, not so much that it interferes with the creativity. And so we decided that was something that we would try to design as a business and really help creative organizations build value for themselves, for their owners, for their employees, and for their clients.
And how has the journey been so far?
Amazing, actually. We gave ourselves 2 years and we said, look, either the industry will want what we are offering or not, or coming from big corporate organizations, it may not be enough for us. So we give ourselves 2 years, or the money might run out because we may not be successful. And then 7 years into the journey, we sort of sat around and went, oh, hang on, we were supposed to have reevaluated this in 2 years. And still going strong. It's 18 years this year.
Wow, amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you run and own the Leach Partnership with your husband, William Leach, my ex-CEO, may I add. What wisdom can you share about how to make a partnership at home and in business work without adversely affecting your marriage?
Yeah. Okay. So again, I think, creating and building something together is always good for any relationship, whether it's a work friendship or a romantic partnership, as it is in our case. I think the joy that we get out of creating something together is really, it's very, it's very grounding for us. But it wasn't always easy, and we had to ditch quite a few rules right at the beginning. And one of them was to do with equality. So we had this amazing nirvana kind of view that, we would be 50-50 at home, 50-50 at work. And it was really, really difficult. And we then kind of one day we had this little light bulb moment driving down a very busy road. We just went, we're just trying to achieve the impossible here, because sometimes one of us needs to be more present at work. One of us, if one of the children gets sick, we can't just go, last time was you, so this time will be me, because really I'm the one they wanted. And I'm the one who wanted to be with them. So we agreed to ditch some rules. We also agreed that this rule that we had in place about work-life balance and work hours and life hours and keeping them very separate just didn't work for us, because sometimes you'd have a great idea to do with work, but it was home time, so we couldn't really talk about it. And that was frustrating. And equally, there were times when I wanted to be spending the whole day with the children and not doing any work at all. And so again, that was a rule that we decided to ditch and just go, we're just going to go with the flow. But in the main, I think it was really about setting up support systems before we needed it. So before we ran into any trouble, we actually engaged a psychologist to help us, because we said our relationship is the strongest thing. And we want to make sure that absolutely stays strong and beautiful. And so we almost needed her to be a chiropractor and every now and then just kind of click us back into place if we were getting out of sync. But we set that up and we didn't need it. So the times that we needed it, we already had the muscle memory of how to express an issue, what resolution we were seeking. And we've been working with that person now for 20 years.
That is amazing wisdom. But you know what? This is why we're having this conversation. Yeah, that's an amazing structure to put in place to preempt. I was just saying yesterday, I was having a session with my mentees because I started the Busara leadership mentoring journey. And it is about knowing who you are, and creating that kind of life. Because a lot of us listen to all the voices and what a perfect marriage is and what perfect this. And then you don't create a life that suits you and your own character. So I was saying, I think part of why I'm always joyous is that my life is created under knowing me. So even my business, I know that I'm focusing on mom. I cannot be having a business that needs me to think of other people as much, so the associate model works for me. And I've had partnerships since I started, literally, if you counted the people, it will be like any company, but they're all in their own companies and, retained relationships. So I love that. It's really good lesson. I hope for couples who are working together to get out of it. So not forgetting that a Sangoma, for people who don't know what a Sangoma is a traditional healer in South Africa, foresaw the marriage between you and William. Even before you were a couple, you and William have a successful marriage now. After how many years has it been?
It's 21 years this year.
Yay! What are the two ingredients that really make it work?
I think the fact that we fundamentally share the same values and the ones that are really important, because there are things that we don't agree on a lot, but our fundamental values around family first, around choosing love, is really very true to both of us. And I think we value our relationship and we will do anything for it. So we fight for it, and we choose to be in love. So I think it really makes a difference, because quite early on, I just said to Will, well, you're stuck with me now. So whatever comes up, we're going to have to work it out. We're not walking away from it.
Yeah.
So I think for both of us to feel that, we would do whatever it takes to make it work is very, very strong. And it's easy because, I feel love and respect every day, and I hope William does. So
yeah. You really got a good one there, yeah. Yeah, and I'm so happy he was my first business leader. It really made a difference to the human being I evolved to be. And then having you as a friend, that made a difference. Our quiet times in the, let's move on. And many amazing times.
We could spend a long time here talking about our friendship, couldn't we?
Yeah. Anyway. But if you were not here tomorrow, what do you think the world will miss about you?
Oh, this is a tough one. I did, knowing that you were going to ask me something like it. I did actually.
Unique value proposition, you know us.
Yeah. And I did talk to William and the boys about it to get their perspectives and what we thought. And interestingly, they all had a fairly common theme, which is there's a kind of connectivity that I carry with me. I build communities around me, whether that's, with the kids' schools or with my work or with the charity work that I do or with my friend groups. And they said, that connectivity and that glue and holding people together and whether it's to achieve something or not, it's that connectivity and positivity that we would all miss very much, they said.
Yeah. And I was just, some people actually don't believe how sociable I was in advertising. And I think it was due to you and William as well, kind of getting me out there. And it was a joy. I didn't feel like you were in my space. Unlike, sometimes I'm very protective of my energy. So I will definitely, but I think also your calm brain, there's an element of the way you look at things, which is why sometimes I send a WhatsApp and say, hey, I'm looking at this. Does that make sense to you? Because I'm looking at it. It doesn't make sense to me. So that wisdom has always been there. So you left India to first live in Kenya, then to South Africa in your early 20s. What gave you the courage to leave home and to come to Africa?
I didn't see it as courageous to have done that, really, because I think I had an innate sense of adventure that was fostered and nurtured by my parents and my upbringing that we've already spoken about, like moving every few months. So I think I always craved change. And Africa for me was always something that I felt I would be at home in. And I think a big part of that was on my 7th birthday, my father took us to a safari, so deep in the jungles of India, and I was riding an elephant, and he then said to me, one day you will go to Africa and you will see the true majesty of what nature is. And he used to read me a lot of books. He used to gift me a lot of books to do with Africa. So for me, I already felt that it was going to be home one day.
Yeah.
So when that opportunity came up, I didn't think twice about it. I jumped in feet first. How quickly could I get on that plane? Experience it. And it was the best decision of my life, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm very grateful that because, we were talking about navigating bias with my mentees and the stereotypes we have about different race groups or language groups or whatever. And having grown up in KwaZulu-Natal, as you know, in South Africa, there's a large Indian population. And I remember when you came and I was talking about some of the behaviors that I have issues with. And you kind of had picked up on them. And I was like, you helped me because I realized, okay, I'm not a racist. There's a behavior that I don't agree with. And you, as an Indian as well, is experiencing it. And I think you actually made me a richer person in terms of how I understood diversity and inclusion. Because a lot of people found, gosh, you love Sangeeta, she's Indian. I was like, actually, she made me realize it's a behavior. And that's what I think all of us can learn to do instead of just generalizing. If you meet somebody who my mom had difficult experiences with people who are of Indian descent at work, and it became like an Indian thing. And then suddenly you meet somebody and it's like, yeah, it's not. It's an individual because now a lot of my network is Indian women and they're all different and distinctive. And you can only talk from experience when you talk diversity and inclusion. I think you were the first person that helped me on that journey. So if I never ever told you that, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for telling me that.
Yeah. So the sad part is that you lost your father when you were very young. So did your husband, William. During the terrible parts and times of the COVID pandemic, William also lost his mother, Angela, whom we loved very much. The worst part being that he could not travel to England from Australia to bid farewell to her physically because of the lockdowns. What wisdom can you share about helping a partner through loss and grief?
It's a very difficult one because I have to say in those relationships, yes, William lost his mother, but I also lost my mother-in-law. And I was very lucky. I've been loved fiercely by two mothers, his mother and my mother. But still in that moment of time, I think how your partner shows up for you in grief is just so important to a relationship. And I think for us, through all of those tragedies that you've just talked about, to really not try and, think of this is the way you should grieve, or these are the platitudes, or, you'll get over it. It was really to accompany Will into that space of grief, but giving him the space to grieve the way that he needed to. Because no one can actually tell you when it's time or how deeply you should feel about something, because there were some days where you feel normal. And then, you go to pick up the phone to tell your mother something and then realize that she's not there. And it was just giving him that space to heal. And for our boys as well, they lost their grandmother, but they were very much aware that Will was sort of the central person that we all needed to look after. And whether that was doing something practical that gave him a bit of space, or whether that was actually telling the funny stories about her and crying together if that's what we felt like doing or he felt like doing. So I think it's really more about just accompanying that person into that pain and just being there for them. It is what gives them the faith and the confidence and the space to actually let go and grieve.
I like that. I like the accompanying somebody into a space. I hope it inspires somebody. Because, after losing my sister and father all those years ago, it still can happen. Like, you just break down, It's a tough journey.
Hindsight, the most amazing times, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So your life is fairly full. Even whilst you lived in South Africa, you were always up to socializing, entertaining, being available to your circle of friends. Do you ever want to withdraw from the world from exhaustion? Where do you draw your energy from?
Do you know, I think like plants, I do derive a lot of energy from other people. And partly I think that's why I have such a big social life. But it's not a social life that is full of, events and parties and places to be seen. It's not that. My social life is around people that I really like and enjoy and want to spend time with. And then the flip side of that is when I need to recharge, it's nature, which is really where I go, whether it's the South African bush, whether it's the Australian bush. And, we in Sydney, we're very lucky. We live in this beautiful city that is right in the middle of the bush. So that we have wallabies 5 minutes up the road, dolphins that come to the front of the house. Those things really fill me up. And I do seek that physical interaction with nature. So I do long walks, I paddleboard, I get out in nature as much as I can. Our house is right in the middle of a thing. I wish it wasn't so dark. I could show you. But, I think it's that combination of people and genuine, lovely people. And just sort of enjoying the world around me in that quiet moment is where I go to. I don't really ever feel like I need to withdraw.
Yeah, I think that is the contrast when you're with people that don't drain you. It doesn't feel like comes. I always say the most magical experience was when you both hired Pinder Game Reserve for all your guests.
Yes.
And when I tell people the entire lodge was just friends and family, and your wedding in the bush with the lions somewhere there. I mean, those moments are magical, aren't they? Never to be forgotten.
That was the perfect combination of what gives me energy.
Yeah.
People, friends that I love in a setting.
Yeah.
I still, like, my blood actually feels a little bit bubbly when I think about Africa,
Yeah.
It's a very magical place for me.
But also the magic of we don't want gifts, and adopting the school and the foundation where we all gave money to. And I'm always so grateful to have friends like that who show in life that you don't need to pile up billions before you share. That in everything that you're doing, you can integrate other people who are less fortunate. So that was a beautiful lesson to observe. If you were to describe the people of South Africa as you experienced them when you lived here, what would you say?
I think it was like being hugged in a great big warm blanket. I just found there was so much joy and warmth, and I found the people incredibly creative and incredibly charismatic. There are people that you just get drawn to. I would say in the main, and I met people like you and Mr. Modise. I've really experienced, I think, the best of what South Africa had to offer. And above all, I just felt welcomed. I felt very, come in, experience us, see our world, share our world with you, share our joy with you. It was just the most magical time.
Sometimes I think we forget that about ourselves, that sometimes we need reminders of the kind of people, because we can get very caught up in the negatives that are happening, that we miss.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the joy I get. And it's across race groups. I have a lot of banter, mainly with white males in South Africa. I find in strange places, and I'm like, I mean, this is it. This is when I know I'm home, because you'll just meet somebody and you'll find a stranger and say something funny, and they'll look at you, and then you start bantering, and it's like, it's so amazing. You have two sons, Finn and Alfie, who are Australian. Africa and India are known as having strong patriarchal societies in varying measures. Having lived in both, now at a distance, how do you think mothers should be bringing up their sons to change the status quo of women in patriarchal societies?
I think those kind of things really start at home.
Yeah.
And I think that's where both the mother and the father actually need to be setting up that example and role model for those children. And I think it's really important to show that fathers can be weak, mothers can be strong, and vice versa. Rather than this stereotype sometimes I find in India that, fathers can't show emotion and they can't cry and they can't grieve because somehow it reduces them. But I think it just makes them stronger for children. And to show that, there is a strong partnership between a man and a woman who are their most important people. And that it's partnerships, it's not subservience, it's not one person shouldering some extra responsibility. I think it's also about really having a lot of deep conversations with those children from a very young age, because that kind of misogyny starts very young if you're not careful. And these days, the internet gives them avenues to see all kinds of things and fake things that give them the wrong perspective. So around our dinner table, it is feisty all the time, conversations about everything. And we've empowered the boys to speak up and to bring things to that table, to say, I saw that, or this happened to me in school, and this is how we reacted. And actually sometimes have an argument about it because we don't always agree with what the right thing was. And to really give them that time and space and empowerment to say their piece, even if something that they say sounds chauvinistic, because then we can have that discussion, that argument if we need to. So I think to have the conversations that enable them to see for themselves that it is all about, we're all, whether we're men or women or different color or different sexual orientation, whatever it is, that everyone brings something to the table and to appreciate that. But you can't have it unless you open their eyes to it. So even when our kids were very young, we took them to see Malala speak. And we got a little bit of blowback from some friends who said, you think they're a bit too young to take in these concepts? And I had to question, how young do they have to be, really? I mean, she was a very young person when the atrocities happened to her. And why would these children not be imprinted at an early age? And they were terribly inspired by her, read the book. Really, I think it helps to expose them to as much as we can.
Yeah. I must say my parents didn't close off things like that, which allowed me to, because, I don't even think, even movies, not that I was keen on, but I wasn't told, you can't watch this, you can't watch that. No. And I think it makes a difference in terms of also your critical reasoning and thinking, just to observe things. And
Finn Cook's Alfie went through a phase where he wanted to wear a pink tutu because he had a book, one of those days, book week at school, and he said, I want to be Angelina Ballerina. And we went, okay, there's a pink tutu, So what?
Yeah. Because some people are, no, you can't do that to your boy. Yeah. So you start putting ideas into their heads.
That's right.
Yeah.
Your own stereotypes
into
their heads.
Do you experience any racism or unfair discrimination in Australia? If you do, give an example in how you tackle it.
I have to say that I've certainly never experienced any discrimination because of my race in Australia. When we first arrived here, I think there was a bit of sort of casual racism and maybe more like a bias rather than an unconscious bias, rather than overt racism. Partly, I think I'm very lucky. I work in an industry that is very multicultural, that is very diverse, already believes in diversity and inclusion. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it hasn't really affected me that much. In a very funny way, the most racism I've experienced is in India by other Indians. Because in India, there's a huge north-south divide. there is a color issue. I remember, having a boyfriend in my MBA years whose father said, "Oh, you cannot possibly be with this girl. She's too dark." And he kind of took that on board. And so I had to walk away from that relationship because there was no way I could be with someone like that. So it's funny though, it's, that kind of racism, when you've experienced that, that slightly casual racism that may or may not occur just rolls off.
Yeah.
Like push off a duck here. I do know that people have experienced it. For me, all I say to the boys is if they ever do, then they have to call it and they have to stand up for it, whether they see it happening to someone else or to themselves. They actually have to name it and call it and have a conversation about it.
Yeah. I remember, and now we can laugh about it, when you first dated William and you had not told people at home what race he was, and you said you met somebody in Africa and they all took the breath in and thinking, "Oh my gosh, what have you done?" And then when you did say who he was, they're like, "Oh, okay."
Well, to be fair, there was only one of my aunts who lives in the USA that reacted like that. The rest of them were fine. It was just this one aunt that not very impressed with her.
Anyway, it was so funny. And it's kind of interesting. When I go there, it's always fascinating when you see Indian guys paying attention. You're like, okay, what are you doing? Anyway, what keeps you awake at night?
Very little, because I genuinely feel like I can solve either by myself or my family and my friends, that most things can be solved. So there isn't that much that actually bothers me.
Yeah. That's a very healthy way of living. Well, though, like last night, I had a problem because I think the wine kind of impacted my sleep. But anyway, moving on.
I think it's because I genuinely feel I can find a way out.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It is very precious.
So you speak Hindi and English. In what language do you dream most in?
That's an interesting one. I also speak Telugu, which is what we call my mother tongue.
Yeah.
I dream a lot, and I think if I had to pick one, I would say I dream in English.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
Because when I'm private the next day or anything, I don't feel another language in there.
Yeah, I remember somebody asked me what's my mother tongue when I was very young. So I said, I don't know. I dream in English, so I have no idea. But I've also dreamed speaking other languages. And they're like, how do you know? I'm like, yeah, I know. I consciously know that I was speaking a language, but when I'm conscious, I won't remember the language. Yeah. Okay, we can speak forever, so we better start winding down.
Yes.
What is the most courageous decision you've taken so far in your life, and what drove you to that decision?
I think when you make a courageous decision, I think it really does have the power to change your life. And so your values are truly exposed at that point. And I think for us, when we decided to set up our own business, leaving two really very comfortable and lovely corporate jobs, starting a family at the same time, and literally not knowing whether, there was going to be a paycheck because we'd both given up at the same time. But that's where we thought, well, we were backing ourselves, and it's a principle, it's not a principle till you actually put it to the test. And we had a discussion about how much was enough. What did we actually need out of any work? And we started from the point of view that we wanted a life and work to support that. And so it kind of made it a bit less courageous by that point, because we just went, we'll give ourselves an off-ramp. Because I think that's another thing, really, whenever you make a big leap, it's important to think through where the off-ramp might be. So we didn't give ourselves a couple of off-ramps. We designed the life that we wanted and the work that we wanted. And that was a big gamble because, it may not have come off. In the end, it's the happy truth is it has. But it was jumping off that ledge it really did feel like, okay, this has the power to change everything.
Is there a legacy you're striving to leave in the world?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we think beyond ourselves and our immediate families, and our sort of impact on the wider world is what I'd really love to have more people consciously think about. So, that I'm on the board of a charitable organization called the Wayside Chapel, and I have learned so much from that about building communities where the marginalized and the vulnerable are accepted, and actually how little it takes to do that, But by the same token, what you get out of it. So I have this sort of great sense of connection and community because of that work that I do. And I feel like it gives me so much more than I give it. And I think if I can get more people to see that there is joy in service and that there is joy in doing something that is a little bit unselfish, if you like, that's not directly for you or your family or personal gain, that is something that I would love to sort of talk to more people about and show more people about how that is possible and easy.
I also struggle with why we don't do more for human beings and for people around, just because they're human. You don't have to know them. You don't have to,
And at Wayside, this philosophy about, that you should interact with people as people to be met, not problems to be solved. And I think it really shifts your mindset, because you can learn so much from everyone that you meet in there, whatever their circumstances have brought them there. But if you don't see them as immediately, well, how do I fix you? How do I change you?
Yeah.
There's, you just meet them as another human being.
Yeah. And they'll probably influence you more than the other way around. What's still on your bucket list to do as we close down?
Oh, go to Antarctica.
That's next. Okay.
Been wanting to go for 10 years, maybe even longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a bucket list thing.
Well, I'm doing my bucket list this year.
Yeah. What do you do?
Saint Helena Island.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Because remember, before it needed a boat 2 weeks across. Now there's a flight once a week. And I just woke up 1 a.m. and I said, okay, I'm booking, I'm going.
Brilliant. I love that about you.
Yeah. So in wrapping up, what wisdom would you like to leave us with?
I think that success is not absolute and that failure is not final. So really, I think it's important to keep going. Even if you've done really well, keep going, because there's more to be done. And if something gets in your way, failure, then it's not fatal. It's something where you just have to get up and keep going. But I think for me, the keep going is not just keep going for yourself, sort of clear the way for others, clear a path where there isn't a path, make a new trail, make a new ladder for someone else to climb up. And just, I don't know, just don't search for happiness. Just be happy, because it is a choice.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I struggle to believe that. You have a way with words.
Thank you so much for staying up so that we can connect.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
There is a quote that says, show me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. I hope your friends convey a positive message about who you are. Until next time, on Wisdom Personified, Conversations with Dudu Msomi. Thank you for making time for this episode of Wisdom Personified, Conversations with Dudu Msomi. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Click on the bell notification to be informed when our next episode is available. Wisdom Personified Conversations with Dudu Msomi is also now available on Facebook Watch, Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. Enjoy the wisdom journey.